discussion. So as part of this discussion, we actually asked participants to tell us what they would like us to talk about. And on this score, the first four areas, the third one was actually what is sexual harassment? The second one, handling sexual harassment. The first one was what is the legal route? So the most frequently asked question was, what would victims need to do? What is the legal route that they can take? And the last one was, what happens if nothing happens after you do all of this? So at this point, I'm actually going to start with the third most popular question, which was, what is sexual harassment? And Mira, if I may ask you to tell us, what is sexual harassment?
I think Danny has very well explained it also. But let me just go through like the sort of legal definition that we have. Unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that has the purpose or effect of violating dignity of the person harassed or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. What does all this jargon mean? So basically, there are three elements that we need to show. It's sexual in nature, it's unwanted, and the impact on the recipient, impact on the person. So when we talk about impact on the person, it can cause negatively, personally. It can cause negatively the impact on the person's work, if he's in an organization, is employed, or if they are in universities. I believe some of you are law students here. If you're in the university, it'll impact you with your studies. So it's really subjective, because what I may feel offended, someone else might just brush it and say, ah, there he goes again. But honestly, in truth, it's wrong. We need to stop that. So what each one of us receive that, rationalize that incident is different. Some of us may have a past to it, and if it comes back to you again and again, and I will get really upset by it. So it really depends on the recipient. And the types of sexual harassment there are, Jenny has already said, the physical, touching, kissing, verbal. So this is the tricky part, the verbal one, where you have sexist remarks being made, especially whether, for example, sometimes in meetings, or when you're casually sitting around with your friends in the mamak stall or kopitiam, and someone says a sexist, makes a joke. We all go, what did he say now? There he goes again. But actually, I get irritated. But the other person might say, oh, just leave him be. But really, to me, it's offensive. So it really depends who says, how each person takes it. Then you have gestural, leering or glaring, making side remark, showing signs, rude sign, signaling. Well, I nearly wanted to signal, sorry. Visual, yeah, showing photographs, especially on computer screens or just putting it on the wall. That has happened so many times in my legal career. Oh God, yes. Psychological, uninvited social events. Okay, for example, you get people sometimes like, hey, come, let's go out for a drink. First you say, oh, no, thank you. Then second time it does. Third time. It can be really frustrating when they add on like, hey, let's go out for a drink and maybe later, that kind of invitation. So, and also their sexual connotation with add it to your work with or your studies. So for example, if you have some lecturer says to you, hey, come, let's go out. But, you know, if you come out with me tonight, maybe I can upgrade your marks. Or if one of your bosses says, promotion. Things like that happen all the time. So that is basically what sexual harassment is about.
Thank you, Mira. Mira. Okay. So we've heard Sinu, Danny, Mira talk about the theories, about what they've heard people go through, how they've counseled people, what they need, what you need to be careful about in publishing issues of social media on social media. I'd like to now invite someone who is very dear to us because she has very, very kindly agreed to speak about her experience. And we ask the audience to bear in mind that this is a personal story. So we will not be encouraging any questions to her. So if I could, Survivor A, would you like to talk to us, please?
Thank you. I filed a case against my immediate supervisor. He was the leader in the organization, the number one boss. I was a senior member in the organization and I report directly to him. The process after I filed the case against the perpetrator took a very long time. It's almost a year from filing the complaint to the final outcome. During this time, I continued to work in the organization and I went through the internal investigation and domestic inquiry processes. And I went through many challenges. It begins with when I filed my complaint. It was only acknowledged 1 month after I sent to the chairperson. And according to the HR process, they must acknowledge it within 3 working days. They also tried to put in an investigator who is known to the perpetrator to investigate my case. And there were attempts by the HR who reports directly to the perpetrator to control the process. And I was told to transfer out of my usual workplace and I was told to attend meetings where he will be there after I filed my complaint. Not only that, I was put under performance evaluation by my temporary supervisor who also reports to him. So throughout the thing, I did confide in the colleagues when harassment happened, and these colleagues turned against me during the investigation process. And actually, I had one who called me a liar. I saw all this investigation report. So, and I had numerous delays after delays. And to me, all this was done because they wanted me to give up the case. And all I did during that 1 year was to fight. I was thoroughly exhausted. I was very angry. I was hurtful by the way the organization tried to protect itself and did not protect me. Like Dani was saying, they did fail to give me a safe environment especially after I filed. And after an investigation by a senior external person who are experienced in sexual harassment in workplace, it's one of the things that I insisted and have to be put in the terms of reference of the investigator that they want to conduct it. The 3-member panel of the domestic inquiry agreed with the finding of the investigator and that, you know, I was telling the truth. And I was relieved, of course, that because they believed me. And however, because of the delays in the process, the perpetrator was allowed to retire early before the finding was made known to me, and he escaped any liability. I then filed a complaint against the chairman of the board for mishandling the process of my complaint, including the excessive delays and for allowing the perpetrator to escape any liability. And again, I won. Then after that, I have since now resigned from the organization because I could no longer work there. I no longer want to have anything to do with that. And because they failed to protect me, they failed to put in a fair process. And to me, I had it, so I left. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Survivor A. Because we have been revolving around this issue about what an employee should do, and I think your story is very telling, one, because it took you a lot of time, and clearly you were adamant about the fact that you wanted to have this matter dealt with in a way that was acceptable to you. it takes a lot, I think, Survivor A, it takes a lot to go through this. If you could give advice in a moment, to give advice to someone who may be online now, who is going through this, what would you say to them?
To the survivor, yeah. So one thing that was told to me was that it was very, very emotionally draining for me because I had to recall precisely what happened. I had to tell them the time, the date, who was there, what was spoken, what was I wearing, and I had to do this over and over again. So I would tell the survivor, get a friend, and please rehearse. You need to prepare for the inquiry process. You need to prepare for the investigation. You need to have a friend who will be a devil's advocate, because your case would depend on your accuracy. If you get it wrong, the perpetrator would use it against you. And more importantly, I think for the survivor, you must write everything down. It's really crucial because the process demands you to be precise. And this was an advice that was given to me by my HR person, who happens then to be my friend. I truly value it because when I write the complaint, writing the initial complaint was very difficult, but I don't have to produce any evidence. But during the investigation and domestic inquiry process, I have to produce evidence. And then I was scrutinized for everything. So having those things written down and having it compiled somewhere, it just comforted me that I was prepared. I was prepared for this case, and I have to do this. And for another survivor is that please, when I was going through this, I had no idea that I was stressed because I believed that I was strong. So I was pushing myself physically to the point that I was in hospital every month. I couldn't care. I could not eat. I lost my appetite. I lost my hair. It was dropping down. And I got by 4 to 5 hours every day. So I ignored all this. What I would really, and nobody told me actually that I could go to a therapy and get emotional help. So please, do get support, especially your mental health. We are strong, but at one point in time, your body will tell you, and you would need help. So please get help because you will need it. Thanks.
Thank you, Survivor A. Just one more question for you before I let you rest for a little while. If you could publish on social media what had happened to you at that time, yeah, would you have gone on your social media account and said, this has happened to me and this is what I'm going through? Is that something that you would do in hindsight?
At that time, I didn't do because I was told over and over again by the organization that I must keep things confidential. And because of that, I don't want to give them any excuse to sack me for insubordination. But right now, yes, I would have gone to the social media to call out on the organization. I don't think I would detail what happened to me, but I would call out an organization because they failed to give me the process that is already in place in that organization. That I would do.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Survivor A. So we've heard firsthand what a survivor may have to go through. And it's actually really important in events like this that we hear stories like this, partly because it empowers people who are here, whether this is happening to you or to someone close to you, or whether you are the owner or operator of an organization that is contemplating to put zero tolerance policies in place. And I think this is a really, really good lesson about why it's important to do so. I'd like to go back to that slide with the questions. And the second most popular question was about handling sexual harassment. And Danny, I'm going to leave this with you to discuss handling sexual harassment.
Thank you, Santi. So, okay, so when sexual harassment occurs, right, there are different levels of severity. And sometimes, and this doesn't apply to every occasion, right? Sometimes in mild cases and where it is practical, you can ask the perpetrator to stop, right? For example, when someone makes an inappropriate joke, right? And this is very common because sometimes, people just say something in passing and they think that it's funny when it's not. Tell them to stop. But this would only work if I mean, where the situation allows for it, right? It will not apply to any other situation. It will not apply to everyone, because there are power dynamics that are involved with it. There are also, you know, sometimes when things happen, you just freeze and you're not entirely sure, wait, what, right? And sometimes that you do think about that, right? So that is for mild cases. Where it is not practical, then there are a few avenues that you can go to. Santi, if you could share the slide on the different options. Okay, sorry, yeah, okay. So where it is not practical, right? And usually, you know, an example of this is when the perpetrator is a person of authority, right? Or someone who is of a certain level of seniority, then it's not possible for you to say something there and then. And when it gets to that level and you need to make a complaint and all that, then there are a few options that you can go to. The first one is within the organization. An organization here can mean, you know, whether you're working there or whether, you know, it is somewhere that you go to, like, for example, if you're a patron at a hotel, for example, or even if you're a university student. Then again, there are different ways. If this happened in the context of employment, then you can reach out to your HR, the human resource, or a trusted person, preferably someone in management or someone who has authority, and lodge a complaint, right? And under the Employment Act, the organization is obliged to investigate into the matter, right? Your organization may or may not have an internal sexual harassment policy and mechanism to handle the complaint, right? But even if they don't have a complaint, they still need to investigate it, right? And there is actually, as I mentioned earlier, a code on prevention and eradication of sexual harassment, which organizations can adopt in order to deal with sexual harassment. If the incident occurred in public service, so if you're a civil servant, for example, then you can refer to Circular Number 5 that was issued in 2018 on sexual harassment. And if the incident happened in the if the incident happened, let's say you are you are a customer at a hotel or a restaurant, then you may be able to go through that way, and then you know, the organization or the restaurant or the company or whatever might have their own internal policies and mechanism. But that would depend on that individual organization or body as well, right? And the outcome for that would actually depend on what the organization has. So for example, in the context of employment, the remedy could be something along the lines of like, you know, an action against the perpetrator, for example, that he or she may lose employment or get demoted or face disciplinary action. But that is, again, the outcome of that varies. And I've seen cases where, like, you know, people have complained against you know, a very established hotel, for example, and the person lodges a complaint, and the hotel dealt with it and finally awarded compensation to the complainant, right? But this doesn't apply to everybody. So that's option one, that is within the organization. The second one is the criminal litigation route. This one is a bit more tricky. So when we say criminal route, we actually mean, you know, when you lodge a police report, this is what is going to happen. The first thing is you're going to have to go through an investigation, right? Someone is going to be assigned to you to if you're lucky, then you're going to have an IO or investigating officer listen to what it is that you have to say, and then look into the facts of the case and other evidence. This, you know, I mean, practically speaking, like Survivor A has mentioned, and I think this applies everywhere as well, you need to be prepared to tell your story over and over and over again. And what happens after that is that after the investigation process occurs, and if it goes to the AG's chambers, then the state may prosecute the case, right? So when that happens, then the case will actually be brought by the state, and you will become a witness to the case. You're not actually a party. So that's an important thing to note. And the outcome of that, right, will usually include punishment, like imprisonment or fine, to the perpetrator. And because you're a witness, you're not, although the prosecution will actually listen to you and as the primary witness, you may appoint a watching brief just to accompany you and to help you or assist you in the case. So that's option 2. Option 3 is the civil case. Also another thing that I think I needed to mention was MCMC as well, right? Because if it happens or if it occurs online, then you can actually lodge a report to MCMC. But again, MCMC might have their own, and we've seen this where sometimes MCMC would say, I can't do anything because I don't have any orders from the police. So, there are some difficulties. And number 3 is the civil route, right? And if you do this, so there's a tort of sexual harassment that was recently established. It's a fairly new area of law, right? And what you need to do is that you would need a lawyer, right, to act on your behalf, to do their research and prep for your case. And the outcome would be depending on what you want, and this is based on the advice that your lawyer will give to you. So, like, one of the possible remedies would be in the form of compensation or damages. So these are the 3 options. Having said that, right, and in taking all of these 3 options into consideration, right, you need to be prepared, number 1, to undergo an investigation or undergo interviews about the incident. So in a case that I had earlier, there was an investigation panel set up within this particular body or institution. And number 1, you need to lodge, number 1, when you put in your complaint, you need to be as detailed as possible, as Survivor A has mentioned, right? And number 2, you need to keep records of the incidents. What is the date? What was the time? What was the location? What happened? Who was involved? Who was around? And sometimes the people that you spoke to first may also be helpful, because that person can then help, to maybe called as a witness to support or corroborate your evidence about how you reacted and your behavior following the incident. And as Survivor A mentioned, and this is actually real practical situations, right? It also helps to write about it in a journal, because, and especially as the incident happened, because while that is when the details of the incidents are still fresh in your mind, and you know that over the course of the next few months or even a year, you're going to be asked this question again and again and again, right? So these are the considerations that you need to take into account when you pursue your options.
Okay, thank you, Danny.